While searching for my wife at her office, I noticed a gold-plated pen engraved with my daughter's name. The moment I picked it up, I heard a mechanical click. A hidden wall opened before my eyes. Curiosity drove me to step inside. What I found made my hands tremble and took my breath away, because the truth I'd been searching for all this time had been imprisoned in this very room. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, hit like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Quick note, this is a fictional story with dramatized elements for storytelling and educational value. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental, but the message is deeply meaningful. Now let me tell you what happened next. The Seattle rain hadn't let up since morning. I drove through it anyway, wipers slapping a rhythm against the windshield that matched the unease in my chest. I needed to see Vanessa, to talk, to feel connected to something. Anything that didn't remind me that my daughter had been gone for 6 months and 3 days. Columbia Center rose like a steel monolith against the gray November sky. 76 floors of glass and ambition. Pierce Development Corporation occupied the 28th floor had for 18 years. I'd built this company from the ground up with my late wife Jennifer. Now it felt like walking through someone else's dream. I parked in my reserved spot and took the elevator up, barely noticing the familiar hum of machinery or the soft chime at each floor. My mind was elsewhere. It had been elsewhere since April 15th. Since the day Natalie's car was found abandoned near Rattlesnake Ledge, doors open, keys inside, no sign of my daughter anywhere. The elevator doors opened onto the 28th floor. Our reception area was all dark wood and understated elegance, Jennifer's design years ago. Amanda Clark looked up from behind the curved desk, her professional smile faltering just slightly when she saw me. "Mr. Pierce," she said, her voice careful. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Is Vanessa in?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Lately, everyone spoke to me like I was made of glass, like if they said the wrong thing, I'd shatter. Amanda glanced at her computer screen. "She's with a client right now. A design consultation. Should be another 20 minutes or so." She paused. "Would you like me to let her know you're here?" I shook my head. "No need. I'll wait in her office." I had a key. Vanessa had given it to me 6 months ago after we'd gotten married. "You're always welcome in my space," she'd said, pressing the small silver key into my palm. At the time, it had felt like trust, like intimacy. Now, walking down the hallway toward her corner office, I wasn't sure what it felt like. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Vanessa's office was everything mine wasn't: warm, inviting, filled with soft textures and carefully chosen art. A massive mahogany desk sat beneath windows that looked out over Elliott Bay. On clear days, you could see the Olympic Mountains. Today, there was only fog. I dropped into one of the leather chairs facing her desk, trying to shake off the cold that had settled in my bones. The office smelled like her perfume, something subtle, expensive, floral. For a moment, I let myself close my eyes and just breathe. When I opened them again, my gaze landed on her desk. It was immaculate, as always. A silver pen holder, a small succulent in a ceramic pot, a leather-bound planner closed, and beside the planner, lying at an angle like someone had set it down in a hurry, was a pen. Not just any pen. A Mont Blanc. Gold-plated. The kind that weighs more than it should, that feels serious in your hand. I knew that pen. My heart did something strange, a stutter step, that made me sit forward, suddenly alert. I reached across the desk and picked it up, my fingers closing around the cool metal barrel. There, just above the clip, barely visible unless you were looking for it, were 2 words engraved in delicate script: Natalie P. The air left my lungs. I turned the pen over in my hands, searching for some explanation, some reason this couldn't be what I knew it was. But there was no mistaking it. I'd had this pen custom-made 4 years ago at a little shop in Pioneer Square. Jennifer and I had picked it out together for Natalie's 18th birthday. We'd spent 20 minutes debating the font for the engraving. Natalie had loved it. She'd carried it everywhere, to classes, to coffee shops, to late-night study sessions. "It makes me feel professional," she'd joked. "Like a real adult." She'd promised she'd never lose it. But Natalie had been missing since April. The police had found her car 40 minutes outside the city, abandoned on a trail access road. Her phone had been inside, screen shattered. Her wallet, her keys. But no Natalie. The official theory was that she'd gone hiking alone. Maybe fallen, maybe gotten lost in the dense forest that surrounded Rattlesnake Ledge. Search and rescue had combed the area for 2 weeks. They'd found nothing. After a month, Detective Hayes had sat across from me in my living room and said the words I'd been dreading, "Mr. Pierce, at this point, we have to consider the possibility that Natalie isn't coming back." I'd stopped listening after that. So why was her pen, the pen she'd promised never to lose, sitting on my wife's desk? I stood up, still holding it, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe Natalie had visited Vanessa before she disappeared. Maybe she'd left it here by accident. Maybe no. That didn't make sense. Natalie and Vanessa weren't close. My daughter had been polite to my new wife, but distant. There was no reason for Natalie to have been in this office. Unless. I stared at the pen, turning it over again. It was heavier than I remembered. Too heavy. On instinct, or maybe desperation, I gripped the pen firmly and pulled upward. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard it, a soft, mechanical click, like the sound of a lock disengaging. I froze. The wall behind Vanessa's bookshelf, the one lined with design portfolios and leather-bound volumes, shuddered. Then, with a low hum, the entire section began to slide to the left, revealing a gap I hadn't known existed. Behind the wall was darkness and stairs, a narrow staircase descending into a space that shouldn't be there. I stood at the edge of Vanessa's office, the pen still clutched in my hand, staring into a black void I couldn't explain. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth had gone dry. Somewhere in the building, I heard the muffled chime of an elevator. Voices in the hallway. I should have called someone. I should have backed away, found Amanda asked questions. Instead, I took a step forward. And then another. The darkness swallowed me whole. The air changed as I descended. Colder. Thicker. The kind of air that hasn't moved in a long time. I found the wall with my left hand, rough concrete, slightly damp, and used it to guide myself down. Each step was narrow, steep, the kind of stairs that weren't meant to be used often. I counted them without thinking. 10, 15, 20. At the bottom, my eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light. There was a single LED fixture in the ceiling, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. What I saw made no sense. A room. Maybe 12 feet by 15. The walls were covered in some kind of foam paneling, soundproofing, I realized, with a sick lurch in my stomach. In one corner, a single bed with a thin mattress and a gray blanket. Beside it, a small table with a bottle of water and what looked like protein bars. Against the opposite wall, a mini fridge, the kind you'd find in a college dorm. A narrow door, presumably a bathroom. And in the far corner, mounted high where it could see everything, a camera with a blinking red light. The room was clean, organized. Someone had designed this space with care. I took one step forward, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. And that's when I noticed the figure on the bed. She was curled on her side, facing away from me, her body small beneath the blanket. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Dark hair, longer than I remembered, tangled and dull, thin shoulders. A hand resting on the pillow fingers, pale and delicate. Natalie. My voice cracked on her name. The figure stirred. Slowly, she turned over, blinking in the dim light. When her eyes found mine, They went wide not with recognition, but with something closer to disbelief, like she was seeing a ghost. Not to Lee, I said again, and this time I was moving, crossing the small space in 3 strides, dropping to my knees beside the bed. She pushed herself up on one elbow, staring at me. Her face was gaunt shadows under her eyes, her cheekbones sharper than they should be. But it was her. My daughter. Alive. Dad. The word was barely a whisper. I reached for her, and she flinched just slightly, an instinctive recoil, but then she seemed to understand that I was real, that this wasn't some trick or hallucination. She collapsed forward into my arms, and then she was sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. I held her one hand, cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her 2 thin shoulders, and I felt my own tears streak hot down my face. "You're here," she kept saying over and over. "You're really here. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. I've got you." I pulled back just enough to look at her to catalog the damage. She was pale, too pale and thin in a way that made my chest ache. Her hair was matted, her lips chapped. There were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and fear, but her eyes were clear, focused. She was weak, but she was coherent. "How?" Her voice caught. "How did you find me?" "Your pen," I said, still trying to wrap my mind around the impossibility of this moment. "The Mont Blanc. It was on Vanessa's desk. When I picked it up," I gestured vaguely toward the stairs. The wall opened. Natalie's expression shifted. Something dark and knowing passed over her face. "She kept it," Natalie said, her voice hollow. "She kept it as I don't know, a trophy maybe." "Natalie, what happened? Where have you been? We thought—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "We thought you were gone. We thought you were lost in the woods, that we'd never—" "She drugged me," Natalie said, her voice steadier now, though her hands were shaking. "Vanessa, 6 months ago, April. She asked me to meet her. Said she wanted to talk. Woman to woman. Try to, I don't know, build a relationship or something." I felt my jaw tighten. "Where?" "Here at the office, after hours. She said she had a bottle of wine in her office that we could just talk." Natalie's laugh was bitter broken. "I didn't want to come, but I thought maybe I was being unfair to her. Maybe I should try." "Natalie." "She gave me a glass of wine. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, and then I started feeling strange. Dizzy. She said I looked pale, that maybe I should sit down. I remember sitting in her chair. And then—" Natalie's voice trailed off. "I woke up here. My hands curled into fists. I thought of Vanessa, my wife, the woman who'd held me when I cried over Natalie's disappearance, who'd sat with me through sleepless nights, who'd told me we had to keep hoping, keep believing. She'd been lying the entire time. While I'd been falling apart, she'd known exactly where Natalie was." "How long have you been here?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 6 months, Natalie whispered. "She comes down once a week, brings food, checks on me. Natalie's voice cracked. "She told me no one would ever find me, that eventually the law would declare me gone. And then—" She swallowed hard. "She said it wouldn't matter anymore." I pulled her close again, pressing my forehead to the top of her head. I'm so sorry. God, Natalie, I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," she said quietly. "How could you have known?" "But I should have. That was the thing that would haunt me. I'd married Vanessa a year after Jennifer passed away. I'd brought her into our lives, into our home. I'd trusted her. And all this time I couldn't think about it. Not now. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Natalie out. "Can you walk?" I asked, pulling back to look at her again. She nodded, though she looked uncertain. "I think so. I'm just weak. She doesn't give me much. Just enough to keep me—" She trailed off, unable to say the word. "Alive." "Okay." I stood, then reached down to help her up. She swayed on her feet, and I steadied her, my arm around her waist. She weighed almost nothing. "We're getting you out of here. Right now." "What about Vanessa?" Natalie asked, her voice trembling. "Nah, she'll know. She'll see on the camera. I don't care," I said, and I meant it. Let Vanessa see. Let her know I'd found what she'd hidden. "We're leaving. Come on." I guided her toward the stairs, moving slowly, letting her lean on me. Her legs shook with each step, but she kept moving. As we reached the bottom of the staircase and started to climb, I looked back one last time at the room. The clinical lighting, the soundproof walls, the camera still blinking its red eye. Someone had built this, planned it, made it a prison. And my wife had kept my daughter here for half a year. We climbed. We reached the top of the stairs, just as the sharp click of heels echoed down the hallway outside Vanessa's office. My blood went cold. "Dad." Natalie started to speak, but I pressed a finger to my lips and pulled her toward the back wall. My hand fumbled along the seam of a narrow service door I'd seen maintenance crews use years ago. It gave way with a soft creak, and we slipped into a dim concrete corridor that smelled of old paint and machine oil. The hallway was silent except for our ragged breathing. Natalie leaned heavily against my shoulder, her legs trembling. I could hear her trying not to cry. Behind us, the muffled sound of Vanessa's voice filtered through the walls. She was talking to someone, maybe Amanda, at the front desk. "We have to move," I whispered. At the end of the corridor, a dented freight elevator waited with its heavy metal gate half open. I guided Natalie inside, pulled the gate closed as quietly as I could, and hit the button for the parking garage. The elevator groaned and lurched downward. Each floor felt like an eternity. I watched the numbers descend 27, 26, 25, and prayed Vanessa wouldn't notice the service panel light up on her floor. When the doors finally opened onto the dim concrete of the underground garage, I scanned the rows of parked cars. Mine was near the back exit. I wrapped my arm around Natalie's waist and half carried her toward it. She was so light, so fragile. 6 months in that room had stolen her strength. I opened the back door and helped her slide across the seat. "Lie down," I said, pulling off my coat and draping it over her. "Stay low. Don't let anyone see you." She nodded, her pale face disappearing beneath the fabric. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove out of the garage as calmly as I could manage. My hands were shaking on the wheel. The streets of Seattle blurred past. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Vanessa's car tailing us. But there was nothing. Just rain and brake lights, and the ordinary flow of Friday afternoon traffic. I drove north toward Laurelhurst, toward the one person I knew I could trust. Harold Peterson had been our family's lawyer for nearly 20 years. He'd handled Jennifer's will when she passed 5 years ago, and he'd been the one to comfort me through the worst months of my grief. If anyone could help us now, it was Harold. His house sat at the end of a quiet tree-lined street, a brick Tudor with ivy climbing the walls. I pulled into the driveway and sent him a single text, "Emergency. At your door, please." Seconds later, the front door opened. Harold stood there in a cardigan and slippers, his silver hair disheveled. When he saw me, his expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Jonathan, what's—" "I need your help," I said. I opened the back door and gently lifted Natalie to her feet. Harold's face went white. "My God. Natalie." His wife Linda appeared behind him, her hand flying to her mouth. She rushed forward and took Natalie's other arm, guiding her inside. They led her to the living room couch, and Linda disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with a thick blanket and a glass of water. Natalie took the water with trembling hands and drank slowly. She looked so small, wrapped in that blanket, her eyes hollow and haunted. Harold sat down across from us, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite the shock. "Jonathan, where has she been? We need to call the police." "No," I said sharply. "Not yet." I told him everything. The pen, the hidden staircase, the room beneath Vanessa's office, the camera still recording in that concrete cell. Harold listened in silence, his face growing darker with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This is kidnapping," he said. "You understand that, right? Vanessa held your daughter captive for 6 months." "I know." My voice cracked. "But if we call the police now, she'll know. She'll destroy the evidence. That camera, the room, everything could disappear before anyone can see it." Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. "She drugged me." We all turned to look at her. 6 months ago. Natalie continued, staring down at her hands. "April 15th. Vanessa invited me to meet her for coffee. She said she wanted to talk to clear the air between us. I didn't trust her, but I thought maybe we could find some way to get along." Her voice trembled. "She put something in my drink. I woke up in that room. She told me no one would look for me. She said they'd found my car abandoned near Rattlesnake Ledge Trail. She said eventually they'd assume I was gone, and then no one would ever ask questions." My chest tightened. Rattlesnake Ledge, a popular hiking spot east of the city, known for its steep cliffs and dangerous terrain. Of course, a staged accident. "She came to see me every week," Natalie said. "She brought food, water. She told me it was only temporary. That once everything was settled legally, she'd let me go." I didn't believe that for a second. Neither did Harold. Then Natalie looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't expected, fear mixed with anger. "Dad," she said quietly. "It wasn't just Vanessa." My stomach dropped. Uncle Stephen was part of it too. The room went silent. Stephen Barrett, my business partner, my friend of 18 years, the man who'd stood beside me at Jennifer's funeral, who'd helped me rebuild Pierce Development when I could barely get out of bed. "No," I said. "That's not—" "I heard them talking," Natalie said. High through the camera. They thought I was asleep, but I heard everything. He helped her plan it. The world tilted beneath me. Harold placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Jonathan, we need to decide what we're going to do. And we need to do it now." I stared at my daughter, alive, rescued, but still so far from safe, and felt the weight of every choice I'd ever made pressing down on me. Outside, the rain kept falling on Seattle. Harold stood up from his chair, his face flushed with urgency. "Jonathan, we have to call the police. Right now. This is a criminal case, kidnapping, false imprisonment. God knows what else. Every minute we wait is a minute Vanessa and Stephen could use to cover their tracks." I shook my head slowly. "If we call the police now, they'll know. Vanessa will know the second officers show up at Columbia Center. She'll destroy the room, wipe the camera footage, claim she has no idea what we're talking about. By the time investigators get a warrant, there won't be anything left to find. Jonathan and Stephen." I continued, my voice harder now. "He's the CFO of Pierce Development. He has access to every file, every account, every piece of documentation we've ever created. If he knows we're onto him, he'll burn it all before anyone can prove a thing." Harold opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He looked at Natalie, who sat curled beneath the blanket on his couch, her eyes distant and unfocused. She'd been through hell. The last thing she needed was to watch her rescue fall apart, because we moved too fast. "So, what do you want to do?" Harold asked quietly. "I need time," I said. "Time to gather evidence. Time to figure out exactly what they've done and why. Then we go to the authorities with something they can't ignore." Harold was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed and walked over to his desk. He opened a drawer, pulled out a business card, and handed it to me. The card was simple, printed on heavy cream-colored stock: Sharon Mitchell, private investigator, former FBI special agent, a phone number, an email address, nothing else. "Sharon worked major fraud cases for the Bureau for 15 years, Harold said. "She's discreet, thorough, and she knows how to build a case that'll hold up in court. If anyone can help you do this the right way, it's her." I looked down at the card, then back at Harold. "Thank you." He nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "Just promise me one thing. If this gets dangerous, if Vanessa or Stephen realizes what you're doing, you call the police immediately. No hesitation. Understood." "Understood." I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang 3 times before a calm, professional voice answered. "Mitchell Investigations." "Ms. Mitchell, my name is Jonathan Pierce. Harold Peterson gave me your number. I need your help with a sensitive matter." There was a brief pause. "Harold's a good man. What kind of matter are we talking about?" I glanced at Natalie, then at Harold. "It's complicated. I'd rather explain in person." "Can you meet tonight?" "Yes. There's a cafe near Pike Place Market, corner of First and Pine, 8 o'clock. I'll be there." "Good. And Mr. Pierce." Her voice sharpened slightly. "Come alone. If this is as sensitive as you say, we don't need an audience." The line went dead. I pocketed my phone and looked at Harold. "I have to go home first. If Vanessa suspects anything, if she realizes Natalie's gone, this whole thing falls apart." Linda appeared in the doorway holding a tray with soup and crackers. She set it down in front of Natalie and gave me a long, searching look. "Be careful," she said softly. I nodded. "Natalie stays here. Don't let anyone know she's with you. Not even your neighbors." Harold walked me to the door. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, my phone buzzed. Vanessa's name lit up the screen. My stomach tightened. I answered, forcing my voice to sound casual. "Hey. Honey, where are you?" Vanessa's tone was light, almost playful. "I tried calling you earlier, but you didn't pick up. I was starting to worry." "Sorry, I was in back-to-back meetings all afternoon. You know how Fridays get." The lie came so easily, it scared me. "Just wrapped up a budget review with Vincent Caldwell. We're trying to nail down projections for the 4th quarter. "Oh, that sounds exhausting." She laughed, that warm, familiar sound I used to love. Now it made my skin crawl. "Well, hurry home. I'm making your favorite rosemary chicken with roasted potatoes." "Sounds perfect. I'll be there soon." I ended the call and sat in my car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The drive back to our house in Broadmoor felt surreal. I passed the same streets I'd driven 1,000 times, the same trees lining the sidewalks, the same lights glowing in familiar windows. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly the way it had this morning. But nothing was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again. I pulled into the driveway at 6:45. The house was lit up warm and inviting. Through the kitchen window, I could see Vanessa moving around setting the table. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked inside. "There you are!" Vanessa smiled and came over to kiss me. Her hands were warm against my chest. She smelled like rosemary and wine. How was your day? Long, I said, managing a tired smile. Vincent's worried about the Tacoma project. Thinks we're going over budget. You'll figure it out. You always do. She handed me a glass of red wine. Here. You look like you need this. I took the glass, took a sip. It tasted like ash in my mouth. We sat down to dinner. Vanessa talked about her day, a client meeting fabric samples, something about a design conference in Portland next month. I nodded, asked the right questions, laughed at the right moments. All the while I kept seeing Natalie's pale, hollow face, kept hearing her voice. She drugged me. She said no one would look for me. By 7:30, I'd finished eating and pushed my plate aside. I almost forgot I have a meeting with Harold tonight. We need to go over some paperwork for the estate trust. Jennifer's anniversary is coming up, and there are a few things we need to finalize. Vanessa's expression softened. Oh, honey, I know that's hard for you. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, smiled. I won't be late, I said. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her lips soft and familiar. Drive safe. I got in my car, pulled out of the driveway, and didn't exhale until I'd turned the corner. 20 minutes later, I parked near Pike Place Market. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. Through the window, I could see a woman sitting alone at a corner table, mid-40s, dark hair, pulled back sharp eyes scanning the room. Sharon Mitchell. I walked inside and she looked up. Our eyes met. I crossed the cafe and sat down across from her. Mr. Pierce. Yes. She folded her hands on the table. Tell me everything. And I did. I told Sharon everything. The pen with Natalie's name. The hidden wall behind the bookshelf. The staircase leading down into that soundproofed concrete room where my daughter had been held for 6 months. Vanessa's weekly visits. The staged accident at Rattlesnake Ledge. Stephen Barrett's involvement. Sharon didn't interrupt once. She sat across from me with a small leather notebook open in front of her, writing in quick, precise strokes. Her face remained calm, neutral, the kind of expression that came from years of listening to terrible stories without flinching. When I finally finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. Mr. Pierce, I need to ask you some questions. They might feel intrusive, but they're necessary. I nodded. Whatever you need. When did you marry Vanessa? June 2021. Almost 4 years ago. And when did you meet her? May 2020. At a fundraiser for the Seattle Arts Foundation. She was representing an interior design firm, Sterling and Associates. We talked about architecture design philosophy. She was charming, intelligent. She understood my work in a way most people don't. Sharon wrote something down. And how long after you met did you start seeing each other seriously? A few months. We dated through the summer, got engaged that December. I thought, my voice cracked, I thought I was ready to move on. Jennifer had been gone a year. Natalie encouraged me. She said her mother wouldn't want me to be alone forever. What do you know about Vanessa's life before you met her? I opened my mouth to answer, then stopped. What did I know? She grew up in California. I said slowly. San Diego, I think. She went to design school, somewhere in the Southwest. She moved to Seattle in 2019 to start her firm. Did you ever meet her family? No. She said her parents had passed. No siblings. Friends from before she moved to Seattle. I frowned. A few, but no one close. She said she was focused on building her business. Sharon leaned forward slightly. Mr. Pierce, did you ever visit her office, the one for Sterling and Associates? My stomach tightened. No. She always met clients at their locations or worked from home. She said it was more personal that way. Did she have business partners, employees? She mentioned a few contractors she worked with, but I never met them. Sharon closed her notebook and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Mr. Pierce, I don't think you know very much about your wife at all. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. She was right. I'd married a woman I barely knew. I'd brought her into my home, introduced her to my daughter, given her access to my life, and I couldn't name a single verifiable fact about her past. How had I been so blind? Here's what we're going to do, Sharon said, her voice firm and steady. First, Natalie stays exactly where she is. Harold's house is safe, and no one outside this room needs to know she's there. If Vanessa or Stephen realize she's free, they'll disappear before we can build a case against them. I nodded. Second, you go home tonight and continue acting normal. Nothing changes. You go to work, you have dinner with Vanessa, you do everything exactly the way you've been doing it. Can you do that? Yes. Third, I'm going to run a full background check on Vanessa Sterling. I'll also look into Stephen Barrett Financial Records communications, anything that might tell us what they're planning. What about evidence? I asked. Not the room under her office. We can't touch it yet. Not without tipping them off. But we will. Once we understand what we're dealing with, we'll figure out how to document it in a way that holds up in court. She pulled a small black case from her bag and set it on the table. Inside were what looked like ordinary pens, a phone charger, even a wall clock. Surveillance equipment, she explained. Hidden cameras and audio recorders. I'll need you to place these in strategic locations, your home, maybe your office. Anywhere Vanessa or Stephen might talk when they think they're alone. I stared at the devices. The idea of spying on my own wife, of turning my home into a surveillance site, made my skin crawl. But I thought of Natalie in that concrete room, weak and terrified, and I knew I didn't have a choice. I'll do it. Sharon nodded, then pulled out her laptop and opened it on the table. Let's start with the basics. You said Vanessa's firm is called Sterling and Associates. Yes. She typed quickly, then turned the screen toward me. A sleek, professional website filled the display, Sterling and Associates interior design. Luxury spaces designed with elegance and purpose. There were photos of beautifully decorated rooms, testimonials from supposed clients, a portfolio of high-end projects. Looks legitimate, doesn't it? Sharon said. I nodded slowly. She clicked a few more times, pulling up a separate window. This is the domain registration information. SterlingandAssociates.com was created on March 15, 2020, 2 months before you met Vanessa at that fundraiser. My chest tightened. Now look at this. She opened another tab showing a business directory. No physical office address. The contact number goes to a generic voicemail. And these testimonials... She clicked on one of the glowing reviews. The names don't match any real people in the Seattle area. I ran a reverse image search on the portfolio photos. Half of them are stock images from design magazines. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Mr. Pierce, Sharon said quietly. I don't think your wife is an interior designer. I don't think Sterling and Associates ever existed as a real company. This website was built specifically to create a credible identity for someone who needed one. The cafe suddenly felt too small, too hot. I couldn't breathe. Who is she? I whispered. Sharon's expression was grim. That's what we're going to find out. She closed the laptop and handed me the case of surveillance equipment. Go home. Act normal. Place these devices where they won't be noticed. And whatever you do, don't let Vanessa see that you know. I nodded, numb. I left the cafe and walked to my car. The streets of Seattle were dark and wet. the lights from Pike Place Market reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at nothing. Who had I married? Who was the woman sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, living in the home I'd built with Jennifer? I didn't know. And for the first time since I'd found Natalie in that hidden room, I felt truly afraid. I started the engine and drove home through the rain. Vanessa was waiting. Saturday morning, Vanessa made coffee. I heard the familiar sounds from the kitchen, the grinder whirring water running the soft clink of ceramic mugs on the counter. Through the bedroom doorway, I could see her moving with the easy grace of someone performing a routine she'd done 1,000 times. She appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, holding a steaming mug in each hand. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore one of my old work shirts over her pajamas. She looked warm and sleepy and perfectly domestic. "Good morning, handsome," she said, handing me one of the mugs. "How'd you sleep?" "Fine," I lied. "I'd barely slept at all." She kissed my forehead and settled onto the edge of the bed beside me. "I thought we could drive out to Snoqualmie Falls today. It's supposed to be beautiful. We haven't done anything like that in forever." I took the mug from her, held it between my hands. The coffee smelled rich and familiar, the same blend we'd been drinking for years, and then something clicked in my mind. 4 months. For the past 4 months, I'd been forgetting things. Small things at first, where I'd left my car keys, the name of a contractor I'd worked with for years, appointments I'd scheduled, and then completely blanked on. I'd chalked it up to stress grief over Natalie's disappearance, the weight of running the company, without Stephen's help on certain projects. But what if it wasn't stress? What if it was the coffee I watched Vanessa sip from her own mug, her expression content and relaxed? She had no idea I knew about the room. No idea Natalie was safe. No idea Sharon Mitchell was digging into her past. "That sounds nice," I said carefully. "Let me take a shower first." "Take your time." She kissed me again and left the room. The moment she was gone, I stood and walked quietly to the closet. There was a small insulated thermos on the top shelf, one I'd used for hiking trips years ago. I pulled it down, carried it into the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I poured the entire cup of coffee into the thermos, sealed it tight, and turned on the shower to cover the sound. When I came out, 15 minutes later, the mug sat empty on the nightstand. Vanessa was downstairs making breakfast. By mid-afternoon, I felt different. My mind felt sharper, clearer, as if a fog I hadn't realized was there had started to lift. I could focus on conversations without losing track halfway through. I remembered things, names, numbers, details that would have slipped away from me just yesterday. And then I remembered something else. The vitamins. Every morning for the past 4 months, Vanessa had given me a small white pill with breakfast. "You need to take better care of yourself, honey," she'd said the first time. "These are good for you. Multivitamins with extra B complex. They'll help with your energy." I'd taken them without question. I went into the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet, and found the bottle. The label read, "Daily Wellness Complex. Take 1 tablet daily with food." No brand name, no pharmacy label, just a generic white bottle with a printed sticker. I shook 1 pill into my hand, wrapped it in tissue, and slipped it into my pocket. That evening, as we sat on the couch, watching a movie, neither of us was really paying attention. Vanessa turned to me with a look of concern. "Jonathan, I've been worried about you. You've been so forgetful lately. Maybe you should go see Dr. Mitchell again. He might want to adjust your prescription." Dr. Howard Mitchell. Vanessa had introduced me to him 2 months ago, after I'd mentioned offhandedly that I'd been having trouble concentrating. She'd insisted I see a specialist, someone who could help. Dr. Mitchell had an office in Bellevue. I'd met with him twice. He was soft-spoken, professional, sympathetic. He'd run a few cognitive tests, asked questions about my sleep and stress levels, and diagnosed me with early signs of cognitive decline, possibly the beginning of something more serious. He'd written me a prescription, donepezil. It's commonly used for memory issues, he'd explained. It should help. I'd been taking it ever since, but now sitting on the couch with Vanessa beside me, her hand resting on my knee, I felt a cold knot of suspicion tightening in my chest. "I'll call him Monday," I said. She smiled. "Good, I just want you to be okay." After Vanessa went to bed, I stayed downstairs and pulled out my phone. I opened a search engine and typed Dr. Howard Mitchell, Seattle, Neurology. Nothing. I tried Dr. Howard Mitchell, Bellevue. Still nothing. I tried the Washington State Medical Board database, searched for his name and specialty. No results. My hands were shaking now. I pulled out the business card Dr. Mitchell had given me, heavy cardstock embossed lettering, a phone number, and email address. I dialed the number. It rang twice, then clicked over to an automated answering service. "Thank you for calling. Please leave a message with your name and number, and someone will return your call during business hours." No mention of a doctor, no medical practice name, just a generic voicemail. I hung up and immediately called Sharon. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Pierce, I think my wife has been drugging me." There was a pause. Then, "Tell me everything." I told her about the coffee, the vitamins, the memory problems that had started 4 months ago. I told her about Dr. Mitchell, the diagnosis, the prescription, the fact that he didn't seem to exist anywhere in the public record. Sharon was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was tight and controlled. "I need you to bring me that coffee sample and one of those pills. First thing tomorrow morning. Don't drink anything she gives you. Don't take any more of those vitamins. And whatever you do, don't let her know you're suspicious." "I won't." "Good. We're going to find out exactly what she's been giving you." I ended the call and sat in the dark living room staring at nothing. Vanessa hadn't just imprisoned my daughter. She'd been poisoning me. Sharon called me Monday morning while I was sitting in my office pretending to review budget reports. "Jonathan, we need to meet. Right now." Her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. 20 minutes later, I was standing in her office near Pike Place Market. The space was small and efficient, a desk, filing cabinets, a wall covered in corkboard and photographs. Files were spread across every surface. Sharon gestured for me to sit. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I had the coffee and the pill tested by a lab I trust," she said without preamble. "The results came back this morning." She slid a printed report across the desk. I stared at the list of chemical compounds, the numbers and abbreviations that meant nothing to me. "The coffee contained 2 substances," Sharon continued, "donepezil and lorazepam. High doses of both." I looked up. "What are those?" "Donepezil is used to treat Alzheimer's. It's supposed to improve memory and cognitive function in people who actually need it. But in a healthy person, especially combined with lorazepam, which is a sedative, it can cause confusion, disorientation, and significant memory impairment." My stomach turned. "The pill you gave me, the so-called vitamin Partin." She tapped another report. "Zolpidem. That's a prescription sleep aid. It was mixed with a low dose of an antidepressant that can cause drowsiness and cognitive fog." So she was systematically destroying your cognitive function. Yes. Sharon's voice was flat professional, but I could see the anger in her eyes. "If you'd continued taking these substances within a few months, you'd have exhibited signs of serious mental decline, enough that someone could argue you were no longer capable of managing your own affairs." I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. "There's more." Sharon pulled a manila folder from the pile and opened it. Inside was a photograph of a coffee cup, the one I'd brought her in the thermos. She dusted it for fingerprints. I ran the prints through a database I have access to. Vanessa Sterling doesn't exist in any official record before 2020. No birth certificate, no driver's license, no tax returns. Nothing. She pulled out another document. But these fingerprints match someone else. She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a driver's license photo from Nevada. The woman in the picture was younger. Her hair a different color and style, but the face was unmistakable. Vanessa. Victoria Brooks, Sharon said. She lived in Las Vegas from 2012 to 2015. In 2013, she married a man named James Brooks. He was 62, a retired real estate investor. Comfortable, but not wealthy. I stared at the photo. James Brooks passed away suddenly in June of 2015, listed as stroke. Victoria inherited approximately $720,000. The local police opened an investigation. Family members suspected foul play, but they couldn't find any evidence of wrongdoing. The case was closed. She pulled out another file. The same fingerprints also matched this woman. Another driver's license photo. Different name, different state, but the same face. Vivian Sterling, Phoenix, Arizona, 2016 to 2019. She married Patrick Morrison in early 2017. He was 58, owned a successful construction company. Sharon's voice remained steady, clinical, but I could barely breathe. Patrick Morrison passed away in August of 2019. He fell down the stairs in their home. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Vivian inherited his estate, approximately $1.1 million. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Jonathan, Sharon said quietly, your wife is a professional. She's what law enforcement calls a black widow. She targets older men with money, marries them, and then arranges for them to have accidents or sudden medical emergencies. She inherits their money and moves on to the next target. She laid out 3 photos side by side on the desk. James Brooks, Patrick Morrison, and a professional headshot of me from the Pierce Development website. Your husband, number 3. The words hit me like a physical blow. I've already filed petitions to exhume the bodies of James Brooks and Patrick Morrison. Sharon continued. It'll take a few weeks to get the court orders, but I'm confident we'll find evidence of poisoning. Arsenic, maybe. Or something more sophisticated that mimics natural causes. I stared at the faces of the 2 men. They looked happy in their photos. They'd loved her, trusted her, just like I had. How? My voice came out hoarse. How did she find me? I don't know yet, but I will. Sharon closed the files and looked at me directly. The good news is you're still alive. You found out before she could finish whatever she was planning. The bad news is now that Natalie's gone, Vanessa will know something is wrong. We need to move carefully. I nodded, numb. There's one more thing. Sharon pulled up another document on her laptop. I found a record of a wire transfer from Stephen Barrett's personal account, $50,000 sent to an account registered under the name Victoria Brooks. That was in September of last year, 4 months before Natalie disappeared. My chest tightened. Stephen was paying her. It looks that way. Why, what does he get out of this? That's what we need to find out. I stood up, my legs unsteady. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. Go home, Sharon said. Act normal. Don't let her see that anything's changed. I'll keep digging and we'll figure out the next step. I left her office and walked to my car. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at nothing. Vanessa Sterling, Victoria Brooks, Vivian Sterling. 3 names, 3 husbands, 2 of them gone. I'd never known who she was. I'd married a stranger, a predator, who'd built an entire life around a lie, who'd smiled at me across the breakfast table while poisoning my coffee, who'd locked my daughter in a concrete room and watched her waste away. And I'd loved her. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't know who my wife was, but I was going to find out. I needed to understand why Stephen had betrayed me. Not just for the sake of the investigation, not just to build a case. I needed to know. We'd worked together for 18 years. He'd been at my wedding. He'd held Natalie when she was born. He'd stood beside me at Jennifer's memorial service. What had I done to make him hate me enough to help a woman imprison my daughter? I went down to the garage late that night after Vanessa had gone to bed. The space was cluttered with old storage boxes, things I'd never bothered to sort through, relics from the early days of Pierce development. I pulled down a box labeled 2009 Projects and opened it. Inside were folders, blueprints, contracts. I dug through them until I found what I was looking for. Millennium Tower. The project that had put Pierce development on the map. A 20-story mixed-use building in downtown Seattle, residential commercial, with a public plaza that won 3 design awards. It was the job that had established our reputation, that had opened doors we'd only dreamed of before. I opened the folder and spread the blueprints across the garage floor. They were covered in handwriting. Notes in the margins, calculations, sketches of alternative structural approaches. Stephen's handwriting. I stared at the pages and slowly, sickeningly, a memory surfaced. March 2009. Stephen had come to my office with a design he'd been working on for months. It was brilliant, bold, innovative, with a structural system that balanced aesthetics and engineering in a way I'd never seen before. He'd been so excited, talking a mile a minute, showing me every detail. This could be our breakthrough, Jonathan. This could change everything. I'd told him it was incredible. I'd told him we'd present it together. But then I'd looked at the design more carefully, and I'd seen ways to refine it, small adjustments to the facade, changes to the floor plan that would make it more marketable. I'd spent a week reworking his concept, making it my own. And when the time came to present to the client, I'd gone alone. I found the presentation cover sheet at the bottom of the stack. In my own handwriting, dated March 2009, Millennium Tower. Presented by J. Pierce Development Corporation. Stephen's name was nowhere on it. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. I kept digging through the box and found a stack of old printed emails clipped together with a rusted binder clip. I flipped through them. The first was from Stephen, dated April 2009. Jonathan, you took my design. You removed my name like I never existed. I gave you that project because I thought we were partners, because I trusted you. I won't forget this. Stephen. My reply was below it. I winced as I read my own words. Stephen, you're overreacting. I refined it significantly. The client loved my version. That's how business works. Move on. J. And then at the bottom, one final message from Stephen. You're right. I'll move on. But someday, Jonathan, you'll understand what you took from me. Susan. I sat back on the cold concrete floor, the emails trembling in my hands. 15 years. He'd waited 15 years. I thought back to that time, 2009, 2010. Stephen had stayed with the company. He'd kept working, kept smiling, kept showing up to meetings and client dinners. I'd assumed he'd gotten over it. I'd assumed we'd moved past it. But he hadn't. He'd been waiting. A horrible thought crept into my mind. I pulled out my phone and called Harold. He answered on the third ring, his voice groggy. Jonathan, it's almost midnight. What's wrong? Harold, I need to ask you something about Jennifer. A pause. All right. Stephen, did he ever have feelings for her? The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. My Harold. Jonathan, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but given everything that's happening. He sighed. Stephen proposed to Jennifer. in 2011, before you two started seeing each other. The world tilted. What? He asked her to marry him. She told me about it because she wasn't sure how to handle it. She cared about him, but not that way. She said there was something cold about him, something that made her uncomfortable. What did she say to him? She said no. She told him she valued their professional relationship, but didn't see him romantically. A few months later, she started dating you. I couldn't breathe. She chose you, Jonathan. She always chose you. I ended the call and sat in the dark garage surrounded by blueprints and ghosts. Stephen had brought me a brilliant design, the work of months, maybe years, and I'd stolen it. I'd erased his name and claimed it as my own. I'd built my reputation on his idea, and then I'd married the woman he loved. Jennifer had chosen me over him. She'd rejected him and chosen me. For 15 years, Stephen had watched me build a company on his stolen work. He'd watched me marry Jennifer, raise Natalie live, the life he'd wanted for himself. And when Jennifer passed in 2019, he'd seen an opportunity. Vanessa Victoria. Vivian, whatever her real name was, must have found him somehow. Or maybe he'd found her. Either way, they'd made a deal. She would seduce me, marry me, and slowly destroy me. She'd imprison Natalie, poison my mind, take everything I had. And Stephen would finally get his revenge. Not just for the stolen design. Not just for Jennifer. For everything. I looked down at the blueprints spread across the floor. Stephen's handwriting covering every page, his genius reduced to margins and footnotes, while my name sat in bold letters at the top. Someday, you'll understand what you took from me. I understood now. I'd taken his career, his recognition, his future, and the woman he loved. No wonder he wanted to destroy me. I sat alone in the garage, surrounded by the evidence of my own arrogance, and for the first time, I understood the true depth of Stephen Barrett's hatred. It wasn't just revenge. It was justice. At least that's what he believed. Still with me? Drop a number from 1 to 10 in the comments. How would you rate the story up to this point? Just so you know, what's coming next includes dramatized scenarios that aren't entirely factual. You can close the video now if you prefer, but if you need to see what happens when that door opens and justice walks in, don't go anywhere. Sharon called me Wednesday morning. Jonathan, I found something. It's worse than we thought. Her voice had an edge I'd come to recognize, controlled urgency. Whatever she'd discovered, it was bad. Where? I asked. There's a diner in Redmond, corner of Leary Way and 85th. Can you meet me there in an hour? I'll be there. I told Vanessa I had a site inspection in Redmond, a lie that came so easily now it barely registered. She kissed me goodbye and reminded me to pick up dry cleaning on the way home. I drove north in silence, my mind racing. The diner was small and unremarkable, tucked between a bank and a hardware store. Sharon was already in a back booth when I arrived, a laptop and a stack of files spread across the table. She didn't waste time. I traced Dr. Howard Mitchell, she said, sliding a document toward me. His medical license number, it's fake. I ran it through the Washington State Medical Board database, no match. I tried Oregon, California, every state in the region. Nothing. I stared at the document. It looked official, embossed, seal, state logo, Mitchell's name in bold letters, but the license number didn't exist. The address he listed for his clinic, Sharon continued. It's a UPS store in Bellevue, a mailbox rental. There is no clinic. There never was. My chest tightened. I'm still working on his real identity, but I found something else. She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. Ma, this is a reservation confirmation from Emerald Heights Memory Care in Redmond. It's a private locked facility for patients with advanced Alzheimer's and dementia. I looked at the screen. The reservation was clear, typed in neat rows. Patient name, Jonathan Pierce. Reservation date, July 18th, 2024. Deposit paid $45,000, monthly rate $15,000. Facility contact, Patricia Henderson. Director July. 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Vanessa and whoever Dr. Mitchell really was had already been planning to lock me away. So this is how it was supposed to work. Sharon said, her voice calm but grim. They drug you for months. Your memory deteriorates, you become confused, disoriented. Dr. Mitchell, or whatever his real name is, diagnoses you with early-onset Alzheimer's. He writes reports documenting your decline. She pulled another document from the stack. Then Vanessa files for conservatorship. That's a legal process where the court declares you incapable of managing your own affairs and appoints someone, usually a spouse, as your legal guardian. With Mitchell's medical reports backing her up, it would be easy. I couldn't breathe. Once she has conservatorship, she commits you to Emerald Heights. You're locked in a memory care unit, isolated under her complete control. She can change your will, transfer assets, do whatever she wants, while you're legally declared incompetent to stop her. And then, my voice came out hoarse. Sharon met my eyes. A year, maybe 2, then you pass away, officially from complications related to Alzheimer's. No one questions it. Cognitive decline, patients often go quickly once they're institutionalized. And with the drugs she's been giving you, she could easily make it look natural. I felt like I was drowning. Natalie's still officially missing, Sharon continued. After you're gone, Vanessa waits the required time period, usually 7 years, and has her declared legally gone as well. No witnesses, no heirs. She inherits everything. She slid another document across the table. It was a life insurance policy. $10 million. Insured Jonathan Pierce, beneficiary, Vanessa Sterling, policy date. August 2023. My signature was at the bottom, but I'd never seen this document before. I'd never signed it. She forged it, Sharon said quietly. I had a handwriting analyst look at it. The signature's close, but it's not yours. She must have practiced. I stared at the forged signature, my name written in someone else's hand. Your estate is worth approximately $52 million, Sharon said. The life insurance adds another 10. If everything had gone according to plan, Vanessa Sterling or Victoria Brooks, or whoever she really is, would have walked away with $62 million. $62 million. The number didn't even feel real. And Stephen, I asked. Sharon pulled up a bank transfer record. He was supposed to get 30%. That's what the original agreement was based on the payment trail I've tracked. $18 million for him, the rest for her. I sat back in the booth, my mind reeling. This wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't just Stephen punishing me for what I'd taken from him 15 years ago. This was systematic, professional, a plan designed to erase me completely. My mind, my freedom, my life, and leave no trace of what had really happened. There's one more thing, Sharon said. I wasn't sure I could take one more thing. She opened a folder and showed me a series of text messages recovered from a phone registered to Stephen Barrett. Vanessa, how long until he's ready for transfer, Stephen? Another month. Mitchell says cognitive function is declining on schedule. Vanessa, good. Henderson at Emerald Heights is asking about timeline. Stephen, tell her November. We'll have conservatorship by then. Vanessa and the girl, Stephen, still contained. No issues. I felt sick. They were talking about you like you were a project, Sharon said. Like Natalie was an obstacle to manage. I stared at the messages, at the cold, clinical language they'd used to discuss destroying my life. Sharon closed the laptop and looked at me across the table, her expression grave. "Jonathan, we need to bring in the FBI. This is way beyond what a private investigator can handle." Friday morning, I walked into the FBI field office in downtown Seattle. The building was all concrete and glass, anonymous and imposing. Sharon was waiting for me in the lobby. She'd arranged everything: the meeting, the files, the evidence we'd gathered over the past 2 weeks. We took an elevator to the 8th floor and were escorted into a conference room. A woman in her late 30s was waiting, standing beside a table covered with folders and a laptop. She had dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, sharp eyes that assessed me the moment I walked in, and the kind of calm authority that came from years of federal work. "Mr. Pierce, I'm Special Agent Michelle Barnes, Commercial Crimes Division." She shook my hand firmly. "Please sit." Sharon and I sat across from her. Harold Peterson arrived a few minutes later, carrying his own briefcase full of legal documents. Agent Barnes didn't waste time. "Mr. Pierce, Sharon's briefed me on your situation. I've reviewed the evidence. The fingerprint matches the fake company, the poisoning, the reservation at Emerald Heights. What you're dealing with is serious, and you're not the first." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She opened a file and turned it toward me. Inside were photographs of Vanessa, different hair, different names, but the same face. Vanessa Sterling, also known as Victoria Brooks, and Vivian Sterling has been on our watch list for 18 months. We suspected her involvement in the sudden passing of James Brooks in Nevada and Patrick Morrison in Arizona, but we couldn't prove it. Both cases were ruled natural causes, and by the time we started looking deeper, she'd already moved on. My stomach turned. "Your case gives us leverage," Agent Barnes continued. "For the first time, we have a living victim, documented evidence of drugging, financial fraud, kidnapping. We have a chance to stop her before she finishes what she started." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "We need to catch her in the act, confessing, planning, discussing the conspiracy with Stephen Barrett. We need recordings that will hold up in court." She laid out the plan. "You continue pretending to decline. Your memory gets worse, your confusion increases. You agree when Vanessa suggests moving into Emerald Heights. We'll equip you with a concealed recording device, something she won't detect. You wear it during conversations with her and Stephen. At the critical moment when you're about to sign conservatorship papers or admission documents, they'll feel safe. That's when people talk. That's when they reveal their plans." "And then?" I asked. "Then we move in, with recorded confessions, the forged insurance policy, the poisoning evidence, the fake doctor, the kidnapping. We'll have enough to arrest both of them and make charges stick." Harold leaned forward. "There's something else you need to understand, Jonathan. About Jennifer's will." I turned to him. "Jennifer set up her estate very carefully. She loved you, but she also wanted to protect Natalie. If Natalie were to pass away before turning 25 without having children of her own, the estate doesn't automatically transfer to you." I frowned. "What do you mean? It goes into a protected trust. You can manage it, draw income from it, but you can't sell the core assets or transfer them to anyone else, including a spouse. It was Jennifer's way of making sure the company and the property stayed in the family." "But you," Harold continued, his voice grim, "if you were placed under conservatorship due to mental incompetence, the conservator, in this case Vanessa, could petition the court to modify the trust. She could argue that your condition requires liquidating assets for your care. Once the court approves, the protections Jennifer built would be gone." I felt sick. "Vanessa researched this," Harold said. "She knew about the clause. She knew she couldn't just inherit if Natalie was gone. She had to destroy your mind, first take legal control, and then dismantle the protections piece by piece." Agent Barnes nodded. "This woman is meticulous. She's done this before and she's good at it. We only get one chance. If she suspects anything, if she thinks you're onto her, she'll disappear. New name, new state, new target. And we'll lose her. I looked at the three of them, Sharon, Harold, Agent Barnes. They were asking me to walk back into my house, smile at the woman who'd poisoned me and imprisoned my daughter, and pretend my mind was crumbling. I'll do it, I said. Whatever it takes. Agent Barnes handed me a small device that looked like a pen. This is a recording pen. Keep it in your shirt pocket. It'll pick up everything within 15 feet. We'll monitor remotely. Over the next few weeks, I gave the performance of my life. I forgot Vanessa's name and called her Jennifer. I asked her the same question 3 times in an hour. I left the stove on. I couldn't remember where I'd parked the car. I lost track of conversations mid-sentence. Vanessa's face showed concern, but I saw something else in her eyes, a flicker of satisfaction quickly hidden. By late November, she was making calls. Monday, November 25th. Dr. Mitchell came to the house. He wasn't the real Alan Brennan yet. Sharon was still tracking that lead. But whoever he was, he played his role perfectly. He examined me. Shone a light in my eyes, asked me to remember 3 words and repeat them 5 minutes later. I failed. He sat down across from Vanessa in our living room, his expression grave. Mrs. Pierce, your husband's cognitive decline has accelerated significantly. He needs professional care. Soon. Vanessa nodded, her face a mask of sorrow. I was afraid of that. I recommend we move forward with the admission to Emerald Heights. The sooner the better. That afternoon, Vanessa made the call. I heard her from the kitchen, her voice calm and efficient. Yes, this is Vanessa Pierce. We'd like to schedule my husband's admission. Yes, Friday works. November 29th. Thank you. She came back into the room and took my hand. It's going to be okay, sweetheart. They're going to take good care of you. I nodded, my eyes unfocused. The trap was set. 4 days until Friday. 4 days to pretend my mind was slipping away, while every word, every confession was recorded. 4 days until Vanessa Sterling finally made the mistake that would end her. Friday, November 29th. The day I was supposed to be admitted to Emerald Heights. But that morning, as Vanessa helped me into my coat, she said we had a short stop to make first. Stephen needs you to sign a few papers at the office. Just a temporary CEO transfer. It'll protect the company while you're getting treatment. I nodded slowly. Okay, if you think that's best. The recording pen was in my shirt pocket. I could feel its weight against my chest. Every word spoken in the next hour would be captured. We drove to Columbia Center in silence. Vanessa kept glancing at me, her face a careful mask of concern. I stared out the window, playing the role of a man whose mind was already half gone. The 28th floor was quiet when we arrived. Vanessa led me to the conference room, her hand gentle on my elbow. Inside, 4 people were waiting. Stephen Barrett sat at the far end of the table, documents in front of him. Beside him sat Dr. Mitchell in a dark suit, a leather portfolio filled with what I assumed were fake medical reports. Harold Peterson was there too, sitting off to the side, tension visible in his face. And across from Harold sat Vincent Caldwell, one of our oldest shareholders, a man who'd invested in Pierce Development decades ago. Jonathan, good to see you. Stephen gestured to the chair at the head of the table. Please sit. I sat down slowly, my movements uncertain. Vanessa took the seat beside me, her hand resting on my arm. Stephen slid a folder across the table. Jonathan, given your health situation, I'm proposing a temporary transfer of CEO responsibilities. It's precautionary, designed to protect both you and the company during your treatment. Vanessa nodded, her voice soft. It's the right thing, sweetheart. You need to focus on getting better. I looked down at the papers, blinking slowly, as if trying to make sense of the words. Then Vincent spoke. "Jonathan, I need to say something." The room went still. Vincent looked at Stephen, then back at me. "Stephen came to me last month, offered to buy my 15% stake in the company, double the market value." Stephen's jaw tightened. "Vincent, this isn't the time." I said no. Vincent continued, ignoring him. "But it made me wonder. If Stephen takes over as CEO while you're incapacitated, and he buys my shares, that gives him 70% control of Pierce Development." He leaned forward, his eyes on mine. "Jonathan, I've known you 20 years. Something about this doesn't feel right." The silence was suffocating. I looked at Vincent, then at Stephen, then at Vanessa. My face stayed blank, confused, the face of a man who couldn't quite follow what was being said. "It's okay, Vincent," I said slowly, my voice uncertain. "I trust Stephen. I trust my wife." Harold cleared his throat and pushed the document closer to me. "Jonathan, if you sign here, you'll be transferring full executive authority to Stephen Barrett." My hand trembled as I picked up the pen, partly act, partly real. The weight of what I was doing, the risk of the trap failing, made my fingers shake. I signed my name at the bottom of the page. Stephen exhaled a sound of pure relief. He reached across the table and pulled the document toward himself, checking the signature carefully. "Thank you, Jonathan. This is the right decision." And then Vanessa did something that changed everything. She reached over and placed her hand on top of Stephen's. It wasn't a friendly gesture. It wasn't the kind of touch you'd give a business partner or a colleague. It was intimate. Her fingers curled around his, and Stephen's hand turned to hold hers, their palms pressing together. I kept my face blank, my eyes unfocused, pretending not to notice. Vanessa spoke quietly, as if I was too far gone to understand. 3 years, Stephen. 3 years playing the devoted wife. But it's done now." Stephen's smile was small, satisfied. "Almost done. Once he's in Emerald Heights, we transfer everything offshore. The accounts, the assets, all of it." She glanced at Dr. Mitchell, who sat stone-faced at the far end of the table. "And then we won't need him anymore." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vincent's face had gone pale. Harold's hand tightened on the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Stephen leaned back in his chair, his smile widening into something triumphant. 15 years, Jonathan," he said, his voice almost conversational. 15 years watching you take credit for my work. Watching you marry the woman I loved. Watching you build an empire on the design I created." He gestured around the conference room, the view of Seattle through the windows, the polished table, the company logo etched into the glass door. "All of this should have been mine, and now, finally, it will be." Vanessa squeezed his hand again, her expression satisfied. "We should leave soon," she murmured. "Henderson's expecting us at Emerald Heights by 10. The sooner we get him settled, the sooner we can start the paperwork." Stephen nodded, still looking at me with that cold, satisfied smile. "Vincent, Harold, thank you for being here. I know this is difficult, but it's what's best for Jonathan and for the company." Vincent looked like he wanted to say something, but the words seemed to die in his throat. Dr. Mitchell closed his leather portfolio with a soft snap. "I'll call ahead to the facility and let them know we're on our way." Vanessa stood and moved to help me to my feet, her grip firm on my elbow. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you somewhere safe." I let her guide me up from the chair, my movements slow and unsteady, my face slack and confused. Stephen gathered the signed documents and slid them into a folder. He stood buttoning his suit jacket, his posture relaxed and confident. He'd won. They'd won. 15 years of waiting, 3 years of careful planning, months of poisoning and manipulation, and now finally they had everything they wanted. Stephen walked toward the door, Vanessa at my side, Dr. Mitchell following behind. Harold remained seated, his face unreadable. Vincent stared at the table, his jaw tight. Stephen reached for the door handle, and then he stopped. He tilted his head slightly as if he'd heard something, or felt something. The energy in the room had shifted. It was subtle, a change in the air, a tension that hadn't been there a moment before. Stephen and Vanessa thought I couldn't hear them anymore. They thought the man slumped in the chair at the head of the table, confused, vacant, barely present, was already gone. But I heard every word. Stephen's voice dropped low, tight with tension. He was still standing near the door, his hand resting on the handle, but he'd turned back to face Vanessa. Our agreement was 50-50. He said, his voice hard. Half the estate, half the insurance payout. That was the deal. Vanessa's expression didn't change. She stood beside my chair, her hand still resting on my arm, her posture calm and composed. Was it? She said coolly. I don't recall signing anything, Stephen. His jaw tightened. Nixum, you wanted revenge on Jonathan. You got it. He's about to spend the rest of his life locked in a care facility, slowly losing his mind. Isn't that what you wanted? Stephen took a step toward her, his voice rising. We had a deal. I helped you plan this. I paid you $50,000. I gave you access to the company, to the financials, to everything you needed. You don't get to cut me out now. Vanessa's smile was cold, sharp as a blade. You helped me because you wanted to destroy him. The money was never really what mattered to you, was it? You wanted him to suffer. And he will. She gestured toward me, still slumped in the chair. You got exactly what you wanted, Stephen. Be grateful. Stephen's face darkened. You've done this before, haven't you, Brooks? Morrison? How many men have you... He stopped himself, but the words hung in the air. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her expression almost amused. Only the ones foolish enough to trust me. The room went silent. Vincent Caldwell looked like he was going to be sick. Harold sat perfectly still, his face pale. Stephen stared at Vanessa, and for the first time, I saw something crack in his composure. You told me we were just going to scare Natalie. Make her disappear for a while. Let Jonathan think she was gone. You said she'd be safe. Vanessa's smile faded. Her eyes narrowed. You said she was staying somewhere comfortable. Stephen continued, his voice getting louder. A hotel, maybe a rental property. But that's not true, is it? What room were you talking about, Vanessa? What did you do? I watched his face carefully. The shock was real. The horror was real. Stephen Barrett had wanted to destroy me. He'd helped Vanessa poison me, manipulate me, set me up for conservatorship and financial ruin. But he hadn't known about the room. He hadn't known Natalie was locked in a soundproofed cell beneath Vanessa's office, starving and terrified, for 6 months. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond. And that's when I stood up. The movement was smooth, deliberate. No trembling. No confusion. I straightened my shoulders, pulled the recording pen from my shirt pocket, and set it on the conference table with a soft click. But I'm not a fool! I said, my voice clear and steady. And I heard every word. The room froze. Vanessa's face went white. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Stephen turned toward me, his eyes wide with shock. Jonathan. Every confession. I continued, looking directly at Vanessa. Every plan. Every lie. All of it recorded. The door to the conference room burst open. Special Agent Michelle Barnes stepped inside, flanked by 6 federal agents in dark suits and bulletproof vests. Their expressions were hard, professional, focused. Vanessa Sterling. Agent Barnes said, her voice calm and authoritative. Also known as Victoria Brooks and Vivian Sterling. You are under arrest for kidnapping conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted conservatorship, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy in connection with the suspicious passings of James Brooks and Patrick Morrison. Two agents moved toward Vanessa. She took a step back, her face twisting with rage. You have no proof I did anything illegal, she spat. Agent Barnes pulled a tablet from her jacket and turned it toward Vanessa. On the screen was a grainy black and white image, a small concrete room with a single bed, a mini refrigerator, and a young woman curled up on the mattress. Natalie. We have 6 months of surveillance footage from the hidden room in your office, Agent Barnes said. We have the recorded confessions from the last 10 minutes, including your admission of involvement in previous cases. And we have testimony from your victim. Vanessa's eyes flicked to the tablet, then back to Agent Barnes. For the first time, I saw fear in her face. One of the agents stepped forward with handcuffs. Turn around, please. Vanessa didn't move. I want a lawyer. You'll get one. Agent Barnes nodded, and the agents took Vanessa by the arms. She jerked away, but they held her firmly, turning her around and cuffing her wrists behind her back. Dr. Mitchell, or whoever he really was, tried to move toward the door. Another agent stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Dr. Howard Mitchell, Agent Barnes said, turning toward him. Or should I call you Alan Brennan? Impersonating a medical professional is a federal offense. You're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and aiding in the unlawful detention of Natalie Pierce. Alan's face crumpled. He didn't resist as the agents cuffed him. Stephen stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at me. His face was ashen, his hands shaking. Stephen Barrett, Agent Barnes said. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and financial crimes related to this case. Wait. Stephen's voice cracked. I didn't know about the room. I didn't know she was hurting Natalie. I thought, you thought you could destroy a man's life and walk away clean, I said quietly. You were wrong. An agent moved toward him with cuffs. Stephen didn't fight. He just stared at me, his face hollow. 15 years, he whispered. You took everything from me. No, I said. You gave it away. The agents led them toward the door. Vanessa still struggling. Alan silent and defeated, Stephen broken. Agent Barnes looked at me. Mr. Pierce, are you all right? I nodded. I wasn't sure if it was true, but I nodded anyway. There's one more thing, she said gently. She stepped aside, and the door opened again. Natalie walked into the conference room. Natalie stood in the doorway. She looked stronger than I'd seen her in months. Her face was still pale, still hollowed by the weight she'd lost during those 6 months in captivity. But there was something different in her eyes now. Resolve, clarity, strength. She'd been through hell, and she'd survived. Vanessa stared at her as if she were seeing a ghost. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Natalie walked slowly into the conference room, her gaze fixed on Vanessa. The FBI agent stepped aside to let her pass. You told me I'd be in that room for 7 years. Natalie said, her voice steady. You said by then Dad would be gone, the legal paperwork would be settled, and no one would care about me anymore. Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Every week you came down, Natalie continued. You brought food just enough to keep me alive. And you talked. She took another step closer. You told me about James Brooks, about how easy it was to make him trust you, how he'd signed over his accounts 3 weeks before he passed. You said he never saw it coming. Vanessa's face remained stone cold, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear, maybe. Or rage. "And Patrick Morrison," Natalie said. "You told me he was harder. Took almost 2 years, but in the end, he believed every word you said. Right up until the moment he fell down those stairs." She stopped a few feet from Vanessa, her hands steady at her sides. "You said men are so easy to manipulate. They think with their hearts, never with their brains. You were proud of it." The room was utterly silent. Natalie turned to look at Stephen, who stood frozen near the conference table, his face ashen. "And you," she said quietly. "Uncle Stephen, you gave her everything. Dad's financial records, his weaknesses, his grief about losing Mom." Stephen closed his eyes. "You helped her research my father like he was a target in some kind of operation. You told her exactly how to hurt him." Stephen's voice came out hoarse. "Natalie, I didn't know she was going to—" "You knew enough," Natalie said. Agent Barnes stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Natalie's shoulder. "Thank you, Natalie. That's enough for now." Natalie nodded and stepped back, her eyes still on Vanessa. Agent Barnes turned to face Vanessa, her expression hard and professional. "We have more than testimony, Miss Sterling. A lot more." She gestured to one of the agents, who placed a folder on the conference table and opened it. Inside were photographs, autopsy reports, lab results, official documents stamped with state seals. Last week we obtained court orders to exhume the bodies of James Brooks and Patrick Morrison," Agent Barnes said. "Both men were tested for toxicology." She slid the lab reports across the table. "James Brooks, arsenic in the bone tissue. Elevated insulin levels at the time of his passing, despite having no history of diabetes." She slid another report forward. "Patrick Morrison, same thing. Arsenic, elevated insulin, no diabetes." Agent Barnes looked up at Vanessa. "You poisoned them slowly over months. Arsenic in small doses, enough to weaken them, make them seem sick, but not enough to trigger immediate suspicion. And then when the time was right, you finished it with an insulin overdose. It mimics natural causes. Heart failure, stroke, no one looks twice." Vanessa's composure cracked just slightly. Her hands, cuffed behind her back, tightened into fists. "But we looked twice," Agent Barnes continued. "And we found exactly what we expected to find." She pulled out another document, this one older, the paper edges yellowed with age. "Carton. We also investigated your family history, Ms. Sterling. Or should I say, Ms. Brennan?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Your father, Robert Brennan, passed away in 1998 when you were 15 years old. Sudden heart failure, according to the original report. You inherited $200,000 from his life insurance policy." Agent Barnes set the document on the table. "We exhumed him too. Same result. Arsenic in the bone tissue." The room went cold. "You took your own father's life when you were a teenager." Agent Barnes said, her voice quiet but cutting. "And you've been doing it ever since. 26 years. I looked at Alan Brennan, who stood handcuffed between two agents, his face pale and hollow. "And he helped you?" I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "Your brother." Agent Barnes nodded. "Half-brother, same father, different mother. Alan Brennan was 26 years old when Robert Brennan passed. He'd been studying pre-med at the time, dropped out a year later." She looked at Alan. "He taught you, didn't he, how to dose the poison, how to avoid detection, how to make it look natural?" Alan said nothing. He just stared at the floor. Vanessa finally spoke, her voice ice cold. "You can't prove any of this." Agent Barnes smiled a small, grim smile. Actually, Ms. Brennan, we can. And we will. She gestured to the agents. Take them. 2 agents stepped forward and took Vanessa by the arms. She jerked against them, her face twisting with fury. I want a lawyer. You hear me? I want a lawyer right now. You'll get one, Agent Barnes said calmly. In the meantime, you're being charged with 7 counts of conspiracy, 4 counts of suspected involvement in suspicious passings, kidnapping, fraud, forgery, and attempted harm to Jonathan Pierce. Another agent moved toward Alan Brennan. He didn't resist. He just let them guide him toward the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The agents led Vanessa and Alan out of the conference room. The door closed behind them with a heavy click. Stephen sat in his chair, handcuffed, staring at nothing. His face was hollow, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man who'd lost everything because he had. He sat there motionless, completely broken. Before the FBI took Stephen away, he asked to speak with me privately. Agent Barnes looked at me, her expression questioning. I nodded. 5 minutes, she said. Supervised. She gestured to 2 agents who positioned themselves near the door. Everyone else filed out. Vincent Harold, the rest of the FBI team. Even Natalie left, though. She squeezed my hand once before she went. The conference room fell quiet. Stephen sat across from me, still handcuffed. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who'd already been convicted, already sentenced, and was simply waiting for the execution. You don't remember anything about Millennium Tower, do you? He said quietly. I looked straight at him. I remember. I stole your design. I erased your name from the presentation. I took credit for work that was yours. Stephen's jaw tightened. You destroyed my career before it even started. That project was my future. It was supposed to be my breakthrough. I nodded slowly. I was wrong, Stephen. I was ambitious and selfish, and I took something that didn't belong to me. But that was 15 years ago. We could have worked it out. We could have talked. Stephen let out a bitter laugh. And worked it out. What about Jennifer? I froze. I loved her first, Jonathan. His voice cracked. I proposed to her in 2011. I told her I wanted to build a life with her. She said no. She said she cared about me, but not that way. He looked down at his cuffed hands. 6 months later, she started dating you. The room was silent except for the hum of the building's ventilation system. I lost my career to you, Stephen said. I lost the woman I loved to you. And I stayed. I kept working for you, kept smiling, kept pretending everything was fine. Because what else could I do? His voice dropped to almost a whisper. And then in 2019, Jennifer discovered I was embezzling from the company. My chest tightened. I had gambling debts, Stephen continued. Bad ones. I'd been taking money from the accounts for almost 2 years, just enough to stay ahead of the people I owed. I thought I could pay it back before anyone noticed. He looked up at me. But Jennifer noticed. She came to me in October of 2019 and told me she was going to report me to the board. She said she didn't want to, but she couldn't let me keep stealing from the company her father built. I was going to lose everything, again. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I contacted Vanessa, Stephen said. Online. I was desperate, looking for anyone who could help me disappear, start over something. She found me on some forum. She said she could make the problem go away. He swallowed hard. I thought she meant blackmail. Threats. Maybe she'd scare Jennifer into keeping quiet. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. His voice broke. I didn't know she was going to take Jennifer's life. I stood up so fast my chair scraped across the floor with a harsh screech. What? Stephen looked up at me, his eyes red. Jennifer didn't pass naturally, Jonathan. Vanessa posed as a nutritionist. September 2019. She came to the house you were at work. She told Jennifer she was conducting a wellness study for women with heart conditions. She gave Jennifer supplements. Vitamins, she called them. My hands were shaking. It was digitalis, Stephen said. Extract from foxglove. In patients with pre-existing heart conditions, it mimics a heart attack perfectly. No one questions it. Jennifer passed on November 14, 2019. Cardiac arrest. The doctors said it was expected given her condition. No one suspected anything. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. I didn't know, Stephen said, his voice barely audible. I swear I didn't know until after. Vanessa told me at the funeral. She pulled me aside, smiled, and said, "Now you owe me." He closed his eyes. That's when she told me the plan for you. She said she'd been watching you for months. She knew about your grief, your loneliness, your guilt over Jennifer. She said you'd be easy. She told me I'd help her, or she'd tell the police I'd hired her to take Jennifer's life. She had records, emails, messages I'd sent when I was panicking. She could make it look like I'd orchestrated the whole thing. So I helped her. I sank back into my chair, my legs unable to hold me up. Vanessa had taken Jennifer's life. Not heart failure, not a tragic accident of genetics and bad luck. She'd been poisoned, slowly, deliberately, and Stephen had been the one who'd brought Vanessa into our lives. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Stephen said quietly. I know there's nothing I can say that will make this right. I just wanted you to know why. I looked at him, this man I'd worked with for 18 years, this man I'd called a friend, this man who'd stood beside me at Jennifer's memorial and told me he was sorry for my loss. You had a right to be angry with me. I said, my voice hollow. You had a right to hate me for what I did. But you didn't just want revenge, Stephen. You helped take my wife's life. You helped imprison my daughter. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. You became something far worse than I ever was. Stephen said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Agent Barnes opened the door. Time's up. The two agents moved forward and helped Stephen to his feet. He didn't resist. He didn't look at me again. They led him out of the conference room. The door closed. I sat alone at the long conference table, surrounded by empty chairs and the ghosts of everything I'd lost. Jennifer, the woman I'd loved for 25 years, the woman I'd built a life with, the woman I'd mourned as a cruel twist of fate. She'd been taken from me, and I'd never known. January 2025. 2 months had passed since the raid at Columbia Center. I sat in the sentencing chamber of the King County Superior Court, the winter chill of Seattle matching the coldness in my heart. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, their cameras pointed at the defense table where Vanessa sat in an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked smaller, somehow diminished, without the careful hair and designer clothes she'd always worn. But her eyes were still sharp, still calculating. She'd changed her plea to guilty 3 weeks ago. Her lawyers had negotiated a deal with the prosecution, confessions to all charges in exchange for avoiding the possibility of execution. Vanessa wanted to live, and she wanted something else too. She wanted to be known. Over the past 3 months, the FBI had continued their investigation into Vanessa's past. What they'd found was worse than anyone had expected. 7 victims. Not 4. Not 5. 7. The prosecution had laid it all out in court over the last 2 days. I'd sat through every minute of it, listening, as they detailed each case, each life Vanessa had taken. Robert Brennan, her father, 1998, arsenic, $200,000 in life insurance. Michael Torres, a widower she'd met in Reno, 1999, insulin overdose, $350,000. David Castellano, a real estate investor in Phoenix, 2005, digitalis, $800,000. Richard Holbrook, a retired surgeon in Scottsdale, 2011, arsenic and insulin, $1.2 million. James Brooks, Las Vegas, 2015, arsenic and insulin, $720,000. Patrick Morrison, Phoenix, 2019, arsenic and insulin, $1.1 million. Jennifer Pierce, Seattle, 2019, digitalis, $52 million if the plan had succeeded. 7 men and women. 7 lives erased over 26 years. The media had been relentless. They called her the Black Widow of Seattle. Cable news ran specials. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Vanessa's face was everywhere, and she loved it. I could see it in the way she sat in court, the way she listened to the testimony, the way she occasionally smiled when a particularly damning piece of evidence was presented. She wasn't ashamed, she was proud. This was her legacy, her story. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Thornton, sat behind the bench, her expression unreadable as she reviewed the sentencing documents. Vanessa Marie Brennan, Judge Thornton said, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. You have pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree involvement in suspicious passings, 4 counts of fraud, 2 counts of kidnapping, and multiple counts of conspiracy. The court has reviewed your plea agreement and accepts it. She looked up, her gaze fixed on Vanessa. You are hereby sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. You will serve your sentence at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. Vanessa didn't react. She just sat there, her face blank. Judge Thornton turned to the next defendant. Stephen Andrew Barrett, you have pleaded guilty to conspiracy in connection with the passing of Jennifer Pierce, conspiracy to commit fraud and kidnapping. You are sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Stephen sat with his head bowed. He didn't look up. He didn't look at me. Alan Joseph Brennan, you have pleaded guilty to impersonating a medical professional, conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to administer harmful substances, and kidnapping. You are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Alan nodded slightly, as if he'd expected nothing less. The judge set down her papers. This court also notes that Detective Robert Hayes of the Seattle Police Department has been formally reprimanded for his inadequate investigation into the disappearance of Natalie Pierce. His failure to follow proper protocol allowed this conspiracy to continue for months longer than it should have. I glanced at Natalie, who sat beside me in the gallery. She'd given testimony earlier in the week, clear, powerful, unflinching. She'd told the court about the 6 months she'd spent in that concrete room, about Vanessa's weekly visits, about the things Vanessa had told her. She'd been stronger than I ever could have imagined. Judge Thornton looked out at the courtroom. This case represents one of the most calculated and prolonged criminal conspiracies this court has ever seen. The victims and their families deserve justice. Today they have it. She struck her gavel once. Court is adjourned. The room erupted in noise, reporters scrambling for the doors, lawyers gathering their files, bailiffs moving to escort the defendants out. But I stayed in my seat, watching, as Vanessa was led toward the side door. Our eyes met across the courtroom. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the noise. but I could read them. "You really loved me, didn't you?" I looked away. I wouldn't give her that. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd broken something in me that could never be fixed. The bailiffs led her out. The door closed behind her. Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting. Cameras, microphones, reporters shouting questions as Natalie and I made our way down the steps. "Mr. Pierce, how do you feel about the sentencing?" "Natalie, what do you want to say to other victims? Do you think justice was served?" I stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked into the cameras. "My daughter is safe," I said. "And justice has been served. That's all that matters." Natalie squeezed my hand. We walked to the car together, ignoring the rest of the questions. But inside, I felt hollow. Jennifer had been taken from me. Poisoned. Her life stolen by a woman I'd invited into our home, a woman I'd married, a woman I'd trusted. And I'd never known. For 5 years, I'd mourned her as a loss I couldn't prevent. I'd grieved her as a tragedy of biology and bad luck. But it had been neither. It had been calculated, deliberate, cold. And no sentence, no amount of justice could bring her back. I drove home alone, the city passing by outside my window in a blur of gray and rain. Natalie had gone to stay with Harold and Linda for a few days. She needed space, time to process everything that had happened. I understood. I pulled into the driveway of the house in Broadmoor. The house Jennifer and I had bought together, the house where we'd raised Natalie, the house where Vanessa had lived and smiled and planned my destruction. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. And no verdict could undo that. February 2025. I spent 8 weeks in detoxification working with specialists to clear the drugs from my system. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic. The donepezil, the lorazepam, the zolpidem. All of it had damaged my cognitive function, but not permanently. With time, rest, and proper treatment, I was expected to make a full recovery. My memory was already clearer. The fog that had clouded my thoughts for months was finally lifting. Natalie deferred her senior year at Stanford. She said she needed time to heal, and I didn't argue. After everything she'd been through, 6 months in captivity, the trial, the media circus, she deserved to take as long as she needed. She was seeing a therapist twice a week. Dr. Sarah Miller, a trauma specialist who worked with survivors of long-term captivity. Natalie didn't talk much about their sessions, but I could see the difference. She was sleeping better, smiling more. We were both learning how to live again. One evening in late May, we sat together on the back porch of the house in Broadmoor, looking out over Lake Washington. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Natalie was quiet for a long time. Then she turned to me. "Dad, I need to tell you something about Mom." My chest tightened. "Okay." She stood up and went inside. When she came back, she was holding a small leather-bound book. The pages were worn, the edges frayed. "Before I was kidnapped, I found this," she said. "In the attic. I was looking for some old photo albums, and I found a box of Mom's things." She handed me the book. It was Jennifer's journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. Her handwriting filled the pages, neat, precise, unmistakably hers. "I've read it a dozen times," Natalie said quietly, "but I think you need to see it too." We sat together, and I read. Most of the entries were ordinary notes about work, about Natalie's school events, about plans for the garden. But then I reached September 2019. September 18th, 2019. A woman came to the house today. She said she was a nutritionist specializing in cardiac health. She knew so much about my condition, things I hadn't told anyone outside my medical team. She offered to help me develop a meal plan, gave me some supplements to try. But something felt wrong. How did she know where I lived? How did she know about my heart condition in the first place? I took her card, but I don't think I'll call her back. My breath caught. I turned the page. October 22nd, 2019. I found discrepancies in the company finances today. Stephen's department. Transfers that don't match up accounts that shouldn't exist. I confronted him about it after the board meeting. He got defensive, said I was mistaken, that I didn't understand the full picture. But I'm not mistaken. I've been going over the numbers for weeks. I need to talk to Harold. I need to know what to do. I could barely see the words through the blur of tears. And then I reached the final entry. November 13th, 2019. If something happens to me, please anyone who reads this, please protect Natalie and Jonathan. I think someone is watching us. I've seen the same car on our street 3 times this week. The nutritionist called again yesterday, even though I never gave her my number. I think I'm in danger. But I don't want to scare them. I don't want to make Jonathan worry when he's already dealing with so much at work. I don't want to frighten Natalie before her finals. I just want to keep them safe. If something happens, please tell them I love them. Please tell them it wasn't their fault. The next page was blank. Jennifer had passed the following day. I covered my face with my hands and cried for the first time since her funeral. Not the quiet, controlled grief I'd allowed myself over the past 5 years. This was raw, broken, the kind of crying that comes from deep in your chest and tears you apart. Natalie put her arms around me and held on tight. "Dad," she whispered. I found this journal in early 2024. I started investigating. I was trying to prove that Mom was taken. I was digging into Vanessa's background, into Stephen's finances. I was getting close. She pulled back, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. That's when Vanessa found out. That's why she took me. I stared at her, the pieces finally falling into place. Natalie hadn't been kidnapped just for the inheritance. She'd been kidnapped because she was close to uncovering the truth about her mother. "You were trying to save her," I said, my voice breaking. "Even after all these years." Natalie nodded. I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't prove it. We sat together in silence for a long time, the journal resting between us. Finally, I told her about Millennium Tower, about stealing Stephen's design 15 years ago, about erasing his name and taking credit for his work. "I'm not innocent in this, Natalie. I started this. My arrogance, my ambition, it created the man who helped take your mother from us." Natalie looked at me, her expression serious. "Dad, what you did was wrong. But what Stephen did was a crime. You made a mistake. He chose revenge. There's a difference." Over the next few weeks, I wrote letters to Stephen's ex-wife and children, apologizing for the role I'd played in his downfall, acknowledging that my actions 15 years ago had set him on a dark path. To the families of Vanessa's other victims, Michael Torres, David Castellano, Richard Holbrook, James Brooks, Patrick Morrison. I told them I was sorry. I told them their loved ones deserved justice. Most of them didn't reply. I understood. I also made another decision. I announced my resignation as CEO of Pierce Development. I hired Rebecca Thornton, 55 years old, 30 years of experience in sustainable architecture, a reputation for integrity and ethical leadership. She would take over the company's daily operations. I would remain as chairman of the board, but the work of running the company would belong to someone who wasn't tainted by this nightmare. Natalie and I sat on the porch again that evening, watching the sun set over the lake. "What do we do now?" she asked. I looked at her, my daughter, my survivor, the strongest person I'd ever known. "We honor your mother," I said. "We do what she would have wanted. We help people." Natalie nodded, a small smile crossing her face. "The Jennifer Pierce Foundation." "Yes. We would build something good from all this pain. We would make sure Jennifer's legacy wasn't just a life taken too soon, but a life that continued to make a difference. It wouldn't bring her back, but it was a start. March 2025. Natalie came to me with a proposal. Dad, I want to turn Mom's legacy into something that helps people. We were sitting in the study, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. She had a folder full of notes, research plans. What are you thinking? I asked. A foundation, the Jennifer Pierce Foundation. For people like us, people who were targeted, manipulated, hurt by the people they trusted most. Over the next month, we built it together. The Jennifer Pierce Foundation's mission was clear: to support victims of marriage fraud, hidden domestic violence, and financial abuse by partners. We focused on 5 areas: legal aid, free lawyers for victims who couldn't afford representation, private investigation services in partnership with Sharon Mitchell, therapy and counseling for survivors, safe housing for those escaping dangerous situations, and education programs to help people recognize the warning signs before it was too late. We donated $5 million as initial funding. Sharon Mitchell joined as Director of Investigations, bringing her expertise and her network of contacts. Harold Peterson handled the legal framework pro bono. Rebecca Thornton Pierce, Development's new CEO, through the company's support behind the foundation, providing resources and office space. And Natalie became the public face. She gave a TED Talk in October. The Room: 6 Months in Captivity and How I Survived. Within 2 weeks, it had 8 million views. She was interviewed on CNN, NBC, and local news stations. She started a blog called Surviving the Unseen, where she wrote about hidden abuse, manipulation tactics, and recovery. Hundreds of people reached out. I think my husband is drugging me. My wife locks me in the house when she leaves. I'm being financially isolated. I don't have access to our accounts anymore. The foundation helped 47 people in the first 3 months alone. Vincent Caldwell donated 15% of his shares in Pierce Development to the foundation's endowment, ensuring it would have long-term stability. At the foundation's opening ceremony in November, a woman approached Natalie. She was in her early 40s, nervous, clutching a folder of documents. Ms. Pierce, I read your blog. I think my husband is drugging me. Can you help? Natalie took her hand. Yes, we can help. I stood in the back of the room watching my daughter turn pain into purpose. This was Jennifer's legacy. Not the money, not the company. This. 1 year after I'd pulled the pen from Vanessa's desk, I stood at Lakeview Cemetery in front of Jennifer's grave. White roses, her favorite, rested in my hands. I know now, Jen, I said quietly. I know what happened. I know you tried to warn me, tried to protect us. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I placed the roses on the headstone. But Natalie's safe, and she's strong. God, she's so strong. You'd be so proud of her. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Natalie was walking up the path, carrying her own flowers. She knelt beside me and placed them next to mine. She would be proud of you too, Dad. We sat together in silence for a while. I'm going back to Stanford next month, Natalie said. I'm going to finish my degree, criminal psychology. I want to understand why people become this way. That's good, I said. That's really good. I wrote to Uncle Stephen, she added quietly. In prison. I looked at her. Did he write back? Last week, he said he doesn't expect forgiveness, but he's glad we're helping people. I'd written to Stephen too. I'd told him I was establishing the Stephen Barrett Scholarship Fund for struggling architecture students who couldn't afford tuition. It wouldn't erase what I'd done to him 15 years ago, but it was a start. His reply had been brief. Jonathan, I don't forgive you. But I forgive myself for becoming something worse than you ever were. About the scholarship. Thank you. It's more than I deserve. Natalie and I walked back to the car together. Dad, she said as we reached the parking lot, do you think you'll ever trust someone again? I thought about that. I don't know, but I think your mom would want me to try. Carefully, Natalie added. Very carefully, I agreed. We drove home through the Seattle rain. Natalie turned on the radio and a song Jennifer used to love filled the car. I thought about everything I'd learned over the past year. Betrayal doesn't come with sirens and flashing lights. It comes quietly. A pill in your coffee. A smile across the breakfast table. A plan set in motion years before you ever see it coming. The people who hurt us most are the ones we invite closest. But survival isn't just about escaping the room they lock you in. It's about learning to trust again carefully, wisely, but still willing to try. Because a life without trust isn't freedom. It's just another kind of prison. At home, I walked into my study and stood at my desk. In a glass case carefully preserved was the Mont Blanc pen. Natalie's pen. The one I'd pulled from Vanessa's desk a year ago. The key that had opened the wall. The key that had saved my daughter's life. It wasn't a reminder of what we'd lost. It was a reminder of what we'd found. Sometimes the key to the truth is hidden in plain sight. Right there in front of us, disguised as something ordinary. We just have to be brave enough to pull it. I closed the study door behind me and walked downstairs where Natalie was making tea in the kitchen, humming the same song that had been on the radio. She looked up and smiled. Ready for dinner? Yeah, I said. I'm ready. We'd survived. We'd healed. We'd built something good from the wreckage. And now, finally, we were ready to begin the next chapter. If there's one thing this family story taught me, it's this: trust isn't weakness, but blindness is. I invited a stranger into my home, into my life, into the space where my family story was written in love and memory. I didn't ask the right questions. I didn't see the warning signs. And because of that, my daughter spent 6 months in hell, and I nearly lost everything Jennifer had worked so hard to protect. Don't be like me. When someone enters your life promising to heal your loneliness, promising to complete your family story, pause. Ask questions. Verify their past. Trust, but verify. Stephen wanted Dad revenge for what I'd stolen from him 15 years ago. I understand his anger, but Dad revenge became something darker when he partnered with a woman who'd been taking lives for 26 years. He didn't just want to hurt me, he wanted to erase me. And that's when Dad revenge crossed the line from justice to evil. Here's what I learned: betrayal doesn't announce itself. It sits across from you at breakfast. It kisses you goodnight. It plans your destruction while you sleep. But survival isn't just escaping. It's learning to trust again, carefully, prayerfully, with eyes wide open. God gave us instincts for a reason. Jennifer felt something was wrong, and she wrote it down. Natalie felt something was wrong, and she investigated. I ignored my instincts because I wanted so desperately not to be alone. That almost cost us everything. Thank you for walking this journey with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation like mine, where the person you trusted most turned out to be your greatest threat? If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss future stories. A gentle reminder: while inspired by real-world cases of marriage fraud and financial abuse, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content isn't your preference, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better.